Alright, today we're going to be tearing into a Honda Fourtrax 300 motor. This is a two-wheel drive, but four-wheel drive's not a whole lot different. I'll explain that when we get there. First thing we're going to do is pull this top end apart. So we're going to pull the cylinder head, we're going to pull the piston and the cylinder off. So we've got a handful of bolts up top here that we've got to remove, and then we want to start by pulling the cam chain tensioner, and that's two 8mm bolts that hold this tensioner on. And to put this tensioner back together, or back in, you want to take that center bolt out, and I'll show you that when I get it off here. This is what it looks like. We have some fuel down in the cylinder, so we're gonna have kind of a mess here as we're taking it apart. But that's what the tensioner looks like. And to clean, or to take this cylinder, take this cam chain tensioner apart, just pull that 8mm bolt. There's a spring-loaded rod in there that we can reset. So now we're going to go ahead and pull, and if you watched our other videos there, we're doing a couple different service things, valve checks, stuff like that. We've pulled these caps already off. So we've got 10mm bolts all the way around this head here, and then a couple 8mm. Got a couple of these 10mm that are tight. And there's no need for them to be this tight. And then an oil line here that we'll pull off. And that's got a banjo bolt, so make sure you put the right bolt back in this one. Which just means it's got a hole going through it. Allow oil to come up through there. Here's the rest of your oil line. You're gonna pull that off. There's all three. The center one is not a banjo bolt. Your other two are. Same style of bolt that would be on your brake lines. Fluid running through there. So we've got all the 10mm off. We're gonna pull the 8mm off. And my adapter broke, so I'm gonna have to bear with me. I've got to loosen these. All right, we just have three 8mm, and I don't even think these are supposed to be 8mm. Although 10mm may not have fit down beside this inspection window. So we got these pulled off here. Just make sure there's nothing else there. This will come up now. Got a plastic mallet here. Tap on it, and that'll pull right up. Sometimes you get a bolt that a thread or two is still on there, giving you a little grief, but all right, those are all off. There's your rockers on the bottom there. Pull your rockers off. Got flat screws. I won't pull them out just for the sake of time, but two flat screws right here, and those will need to come off for your rocker rods to be pulled out, and then your actual rockers can come out. We'll drop down from there. So got your cam chain there, and that's going to be what's holding us up next. So what I do, I pull this 10mm Allen cap off here. You can see where that fuel's been in here. It's really dried this out, but we've got our cap off here. Now we can take a 17mm and you'll be able to see here, we're turning our cam. Now what I'm going to do is remove this 10mm on this sprocket, and then now I'm going to turn this with this crankshaft over here, this socket directly on that crankshaft, and then take this one off. Now that cam sprocket is free. We're able to lift that cam out of there without that cam chain holding us up. We're just going to set that cam chain down beside it to get this all out of here. And then there is your cam right there with your sprocket. I'm just going to put these bolts back on. These are just a small 10mm bolt, so nothing special, but you want to make sure you don't get anything too long on there, in there. There's the cam there. Then we're going to go ahead and pull this cylinder head off. Got 14mm bolts holding this on, and a couple Allens. Impact socket barely gets down in there. Might be best to have a regular socket to get those. Impact socket's just thicker, and so it's hard to get in between there. All right, those are off, and I've got 3 Allens that we'll need to remove. Sometimes this can be a challenge because this motor's kind of flopping everywhere. That wasn't planned. Ooh, these are tight. I'll hold it up against something, we might be able to. The other thing, we might be able to put a socket on there. Sometimes using a socket, they just allows them to spin a little bit easier, which isn't good. These are supposed to be torqued down. I didn't look at the torque specs, but they're supposed to be tight. I'm not sure they're supposed to be this tight. All right, we got one more to go here. All right, those are off. They're loose. Alright, now we've got those 3 out. Now this head is ready to come off. We've got the cylinder head off there. There's your 2 valves. You got your exhaust here, your intake there. Bottom of that dome there looks to be in really good shape. We'll pull that apart and inspect that. Watch for those videos to come. Now we've got your cylinder here. You've got 2 8mm bolts along downside this cam chain area. They're 8mm. And then we've got your guide here. And these guides will come up now. With that fuel that you saw I had in there, that's causing some issues. It's kind of dried everything out. And this guide, you can see its paint's cracking there. This guide's going to be no good. I'm just going to lift this up with a pair of side dikes. Here is your head gasket here. The head gasket sits directly below the head. The base gasket sits below the cylinder, and we'll go over that as we're putting the motor back together. And those are trash. You never want to reuse gaskets like that. There's your cam chain tensioner or guide there. Your this is the guide that is opposite again, the tensioner. So the other guide here we'll pull apart after we get to this bottom end. But we're ready to pull this cylinder off now. And this guide knot chain can sometimes get in the way. There's your base gasket there. That's a paper gasket. All right, I'm gonna spin this. I'm gonna hold this cam chain. You never wanna let that cam chain drop down in there while you're spinning the motor because it could bind up and break your case. But just to show you how to get this piston off of here, I spun that motor up. And now I'm gonna take a pick or a small screwdriver. I'm gonna get in here. There's a little groove beside your piston pin. There's a circlip in there that holds that pin in. Just kind of pry it up with an angled pick like that, and then you can just push your piston pin through there. Then to get that back on, just take your clip, and I take it, hold it in my hands this way, if you can see that, and just slide it in this way. Then what I do, once I get it pretty close to in there, I take my pick then, and I kind of just push it into place. And that pushes the pin in there. That piston looks in really good condition. These walls aren't scored up, or the sides there, the skirts. And then the cylinder, you just want to inspect this really good, the walls, to make sure there's no grooves in there, make sure there's no wear. They can, a lot of times it's just a smallish groove can be, you can hone it. Sometimes that'll make it good enough, but sometimes they do need bored out. So now we're going to go ahead and flip this motor on its side here. We're actually going to pull this stator and flywheel assembly off next. And need something to hold this motor up here. Here we got a socket there, if you can see that. A little higher, that'd be better, but well, I've got, unfortunately, 8 millimeters all the way around this. So bear with me as we take these all apart. Generally, I have an adapter that goes for my 3/8 that'll loosen all these up in a hurry. This right here is your starter gear cover. We've got they call it a gear reduction system. We've got our starter coming in from behind, and then we've got several sets of gears here that'll, kind of an idler gear situation to get it over to turn that motor over. So I'll pull that so you can see what it looks like behind there. Go ahead and start moving these. Real quick while I'm taking these apart here, this right here for the 4-wheel drive models, this case has got a groove running through it. Same exact kind of setup. Actually used all the same bottom end parts, except for this cover is different. And this has got a groove run all the way through it for your drive shaft to run out there and run to your front differential. So your transfer gear here, your output gear set will be slightly different. On the 4-wheel drive model. Ridiculous that it's taken this long. All right, got all this off here. I'm gonna take, there is your, we had one washer fall out. And then just what that happens there is it just sticks to this cover when you're pulling it out. So there's your gear reduction system. So we've got your starter drive here. We've got your idler gear here. So there's a gear on the back side of this. It's all one piece. And then this is called your gear reduction. It goes back to the flywheel there, or behind the flywheel. So that's what that cover looks like. This washer goes there. So now we're able to, yeah, this gear doesn't come out until you pull this cover. The top of this gear does. I'll set that down in there so we don't forget where it came from there. Double check to make sure I don't have any more bolts holding this on here. And this cover is ready to come off. And grab the plastic hammer again. Be careful where you tap on this one at so you don't break any wires. The other thing I do is I'll grab a metal hammer and just slightly tap on it. A lot of times once that seal is broken, that gasket seal, then you can get it off there fairly easily. You hear the change there and sound, and that's that gasket breaking or letting go. I'm going to set this motor down here so we can get a better angle at it. I'm also going to pull this starter off here. That's not going to make any difference. But I just don't want to damage. Well, let's see. Sure it's holding on. Just doesn't give you a lot of good space to hit with a plastic hammer. Go ahead and remove this starter. Just 2 8mm in the back here. This has got the starter has O-rings right here that are sealing up really well. Sometimes that can hold us on. And then also this stator is with the flywheel is magnetic, so sometimes that can give you fits as well. These starters are extremely difficult. They don't give you a whole lot of space at all to get these out. So you kind of got to lift up slightly and wiggle it out at the same time. And with this cover off, that's going to allow it to give us a little more room, or cover loosened up. I do feel like those O-rings are holding us on there. Those O-rings get hot and dried up, kind of creates a little bit of a weld. That's what's going on here. So I've got, I like to spray something down there, but as good as that's sealed up, I'm not totally sure it would do any good. Got quite a bit of movement out of it there. You can see right on that starter where it's sealed up really good. There we go. All right, that seal is what was holding us up there on that starter. So got that off now. I think this cover is going to come off a whole lot easier now. Move some of that dirt out of the way so we don't drop that in there. That gear shifter now, that seal is holding us up. There we go. Got past that. Now we're able just to pull this off of here. So there is your stator there. There's your pulsar here. And we've got your flywheel behind here. Kind of let that drip there. Got your shifter shaft coming out here, and I'll tip this up so you can maybe see a little bit better. All right, we got your flywheel there. 17 millimeter, pull this bolt off. There we go. Now, to pull your flywheel, you gotta have a special tool. And I do have them for sale. If you guys are needing one, contact me. But it's a special bolt that you run through there, and it's a metric thread, 20 by 1.5. So what you do is take and screw that in there. And you want to make sure it's stronger than a bolt. You just don't want to use a bolt because the bolt doesn't have any stronger threads than what this flywheel does. And you'll just strip out the threads of the bolt and damage the threads of the flywheel. So you want to make sure you use the tool required here. Take that, run it in there. Different size sockets will, mine here is a 7/8 socket. You just run this in. And that just pulls it out just like that. So that is removing the flywheel on this Fourtrax. And you just take this gear on, or this bearing on the back here is a one-way gear, and that starts your motor. So it'll just spin one way. Got a bearing on there that generally stays on that shaft. So then we're done with that flywheel. To put this flywheel back on, you don't need this any special tool there. So we've got your gear here, what I talked about earlier with that starter drive system. Got your shift assembly here, your shift shaft. That runs quite a ways through there, and we'll go to the other side and I'll show you where where this matches up on the other side of your clutch system. But there's where your shifter sets on, your foot shifter, and then you got your gear mechanism here. Output gear, we're gonna wait to do that until we pull your clutches and everything, because if we pull this out, a lot of our gears on the inside will just drop. But before I've done it where I've switched this gear out without splitting that case, and it's extremely difficult. You want that motor set up perfectly, and you want to make sure that you're extremely careful with how you run that through. Going back through so you don't pinch anything. So we're going to flip this motor over here, and then I'm going to pull. You can see there how much fuel and oil I had mixed in there. we're going to go ahead and pull this clutch cover. You got your clutch adjust here, and I'll show you how to adjust that. So to adjust your clutch on this Fourtrax 300, take a 14mm bolt, and obviously this motor can be in the four-wheeler while you're doing it, and it's actually better to have it in the four-wheeler so you can test out where it needs to be, but loosen this, and a lot of times they get fairly tight. So take a flat screwdriver then. Well, it can be smaller than this, but this is the one that we have sitting here. And what I do is I take it until, undo your lock nut a little ways so you know you're not touching the bottom of your lock nut instead of adjusting your clutch. Okay, and then you screw this screw in, and you screw it in until it makes contact. Once you feel the contact that's made, I take and back it out slightly, and that's where you need to be. Then I take it, I put that wrench back on, and I adjust this, tighten this lock nut back up. Look like your screw is running clear down in there, and it very well could, but your lock nut here will kind of pull it back out to where it needs to be. And once we get this clutch cover pulled off, you'll be able to see what the other side of this looks like to see what we're adjusting. But just wanted to show you this video so that you could adjust your clutch without removing that cover. And you don't have to remove any of this to adjust that clutch. And it's important that you do that every so often. So we're going to go ahead now, pull the oil filter, here's your gear position lights down here. We've got your reverse lever down here as well. The reverse lever is going to be a 10mm bolt holding that on. And then that's just your arm, a little arm there that you can remove. You probably can't really see that there with this cover on, but there's your reverse lever. We'll remove this cover. Kind of protects the sensors down here and the wire harness. You can still, when you get a lot of debris in there, that can cause issues. So we've got 3 wires down here, 3 sensors. That's what those wires look like there. And there's different letters on there. Neutral, reverse, and then another sensor there, an oil sensor. So those sensors can be pulled out. We'll do that